We had a debate last night, the vice presidential debate between Tim Walz on the Democratic side and J.D. Vance on the Republican side. We got together last night. We watched it. I guess I'll start this off with saying much more interesting, engaging, and even entertaining watch than the presidential debate.
I'm so glad you started there because I am a nerd, okay? I watch a lot of these old presidential debates. I'll go back and I'll rewatch the 2012 and the 2004s, and I'll actually learn something every once in a while. And I think that this debate, I got those vibes. I didn't get the 2016 Trump-Hillary, bashful, ridiculous vibes. I didn't get the 2020 just shut up, man moments.
Yeah.
And I think that actually was better for that's better for the country. I mean, the people we were watching with, some of them are not political at all. And they watched it and they're like actually thoroughly enjoyed it, learning about some of these topics, and they actually got something out of it this time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a strategy that both of them took, right? I think it's at this point we've gotten so polarized that it's politically beneficial to appear like you're trying to reach across the aisle, and both of them did that many times. I feel like Walz probably led in doing that a little bit more. Like I feel like oftentimes Vance would articulate some values that he had on an issue, and Walz would say, I actually agree with a lot of what you're saying, but then he would say, but Trump was in office and he didn't do this, or he tried to kill this bill or something like that, to show that even if you're saying that, it just the candidate hasn't really followed through.
And I like that you say that because it also was a really good strategy by Walz and Vance too, who also deployed it at certain points to differentiate themselves when it mattered.
Yes.
And so they could say, oh, I agree with you on A, B, C, D, and E, but F is where the real heart of the problem is. And then they could go dig a little deeper on F, and that was interesting.
Yes, I like that. I saw a few quotes from pundits afterwards that thought Walz specifically was weaker in the debate because of that, because he seized upon like similarities or things that he heard Vance say. But I thought it very much humanized him.
Yeah.
Right? It seems, I feel like people want to at least see or to be able to believe that the sides are actually listening to each other and giving each other credit when they say things that deserve credit.
One comment I said last night was I think America watched that debate and thought that if these two guys were locked in a room and had to govern the country, they actually could.
Yes.
And I think that was the vibe coming out of it. And some of the polls that came after kind of emphasize that belief. CBS ran a poll and they asked what the tone of the debate was, positive or negative. And CBS found that 88% of watchers said it was a positive tone.
That's crazy.
That's crazy because we haven't had a positive tone in any political atmosphere in I don't know how long.
Well, I don't know. I want to put a lot of the blame here on Trump.
Yeah.
As far as the lack of positivity. Like Trump gets up at his rallies and he's complete doom and gloom. He's like, this country's going absolutely to shit. Like there's going to be a bloodbath if we don't win. And I guess I want to draw that contrast with Kamala because her campaign has been all about joy, right? That's been like their keyword almost.
Joy, optimism, whatever you want to call it. That's been their vibe. And I think that kind of bled into this vice presidential debate. Now I want to get into the question, who do you think won? Because right off the bat, I kind of thought Vance won.
Yeah.
And I thought the polls were going to indicate that afterwards. I thought it was going to be like a 60% Vance, 40% Walz. But what did you think?
This is a really hard question for me to answer. And I don't want to avoid it. I think I would say Walz, but it's hard because Vance did fantastically. Like if you watch this debate and you watch J.D. Vance, and if you have never seen him in a piece of media before, he's a great talker.
Yep, he is.
He knows how to maneuver his arguments to show himself as being in a positive light, as in that like he's great at meeting the viewer or the audience kind of where they're at and then bringing them along with him.
Yeah.
And he did that over and over again. The reason I say Walz won is because I think Walz is really good in that way too. Like Walz did a ton of talking directly to the camera, addressing the concerns, the problems that he knows people have. He's tuned in to people. He has conversations with people all the time. Obviously, he knows all the polling. But I think Walz, part of it, it's a little bit hard to separate my bias from knowing like some truths.
Yeah.
Right. But even for a viewer who didn't, Walz to me was more human.
Genuine.
Right.
He came across way more genuine.
Exactly. Vance he's so perfect, almost so finely tuned in how he talks. It seems like he might be an android.
Yes.
But Walz is like, his reactions to everything and the tone of the intonation that he gives, the words that he's saying, and his body language, it's emphatic in a way that seems superhuman.
You know what? I really like that you say that, because Walz has some blunders, right? Walz
Yes.
has some blunders throughout the debate. In the beginning of the debate, the first question was so difficult.
Oh my God.
Dude, the first question was brutal. It was like, okay, would you support an Israel preemptive strike on Iran?
Yeah.
And then Walz is he's like, and then he just kind of talks about, we need to defend Israel. We need the humanitarian aid for Gaza.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't really have an answer to that question. It's an insane question.
We
right?
literally all reacted in the room like, that is an impossible question.
Yeah, that's an impossible question. But also this spoke to Walz's strengths and weaknesses, because he's a governor from Minnesota, and he's a domestic policy guy.
Yeah.
He's never been involved in foreign policy, really. While he was in Congress, he was involved in foreign policy, but over the last 8 years, he's been governor of a state, or 6 years, he's been governor of a state. He hasn't been on the international stage like that. So that's a hurdle that he has to jump through. Vance actually, I think, had a better answer to that question.
Yes.
Because he just said, I would support whatever Israel decides to do.
Yes.
Which, is an answer.
It was, I guess it was still kind of a non-answer.
Yeah.
Right? Because he didn't have to say yes or no, but it was closer to being a more specific answer to the question.
Yes.
I'm so in agreement with you, though, about how it was clear that Walz wasn't comfortable with the question, but as the questions went more and more into domestic policy, on abortion, on the economy, on gun violence, gun restrictions.
It's really good.
He was fantastic.
Yeah, he was really good. He was really good on those issues. He owned them, and it's because it almost sensed to me like the issues that he was knowledgeable about, he was very good at talking about.
Yeah.
And so when he's knowledgeable about an issue, he's got it. When he's not knowledgeable about an issue, he's not. And what that says to me, though, it makes him seem human.
Yes.
And a little bit relatable.
I guess to me, I also think the way that he talked about the domestic issues very much showed that he was in touch with people and empathizing with him. When he talked about abortion, I think what such a powerful anecdote that he used is about a woman who was trying to travel from Georgia to North Carolina to get an abortion, and she died during the trip because of how long it was. It's like he's the reasoning for what he's doing is coming directly from the suffering of people and trying to alleviate that.
Very humanist,
yes.
right? And
where Vance is more ideologically problem solving.
I agree with that. a lot. And the favorability polling numbers for Walz and Vance prior to the debate have been no secret. Walz is a very favorable guy. Vance is not. And so when they asked the debate watchers who, the favorability ratings of the candidates going into the debate, 52% of people had a favorable view of Walz, 40% of people had a favorable view of Vance. After the debate, 60% of people had a favorable view of Walz, and 49% had a favorable view of Vance. Okay. So both went up, but Walz is still the more favorable guy overall.
Interesting. They went up almost the exact same amount.
Yes.
I think that's telling, and that's the real answer here. Is to me it was basically a wash. The polling that shows people pretty much are 50-50 on who won. I kind of go with that. I did see one Politico snap poll that showed that both did exactly how you would expect with Democrats and Republicans, but that there was a little bit of a lean towards Walz among independents.
I have that on my note sheet. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's interesting. Maybe independents are following a little bit of what I'm saying.
Well, that's what I want to get to now, because I think Vance did a very, very good job throughout the entire debate. And then at the end, he lost it very, very, very badly, because he was asked by Walz straight up, did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? And Vance could not say yes. He could not admit that he lost, and Walz's face was dumbfounded. And I think that dumbfounded expression on Walz's face was what everyone in America was feeling at the exact same moment.
Yes.
All the people who have been kind of tuned out over the last 4 years, kind of forgot how crazy Trump was, saw that moment, and their jaws dropped just like Walz's, and they're like, wait a second, this guy still thinks he won?
Yeah.
This guy still says he won't certify the election results? That's crazy. And we saw that in a couple of the focus groups after the debate. A lot of undecided people were like, dude, you had a great debate, but if I can't trust that you're going to respect my vote, why should I give it to you?
Yeah. And I think Walz framed the difference there perfectly, because he's like, we're finding commonality on a lot of places so far tonight. And I think that's really good. We can compromise and make a lot of progress. But this is one where we just really disagree, because the way that the moderators had framed up the question, and I want to quickly sidebar and give a ton of credit to the moderators.
They did a pretty good job.
They did a great job, I think.
Yeah.
They turned off the mic, Vance's mic and Waltz's mic at one point when they tried to talk over the moderators. They asked really good, hard-hitting questions.
They really did.
But anyways, Waltz was kind of like, we had a violent insurrection. This is not the same as making Facebook posts. It's like it is not comparable to the Russia hoax. We need to know that there isn't going to be another threat or attack on our democracy.
Yeah, like we have to keep in mind here, Donald Trump literally organized fake slates of electors in a bunch of different states, filled out fraudulent documents, and then pressured his vice president to accept these fraudulent documents that he was pushing for.
Yeah.
That's insanity. That's never been done before. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't care. 1876 election, it's not equivalent. 1960 with Hawaii and JFK, it's not equivalent. Okay, and so it's really dumbfounding that the VP candidate is still not going for that. And independents see that and they're like, what the hell are we still doing here like this?
Yeah.
And now I want to get into some of the issues.
Okay.
Because they talked about a lot of really good issues and they actually gave really good answers that I didn't expect. I didn't think that they would get into such good specifics. One of them was the healthcare debate. Okay. And the healthcare debate is one of my biggest issues. I'm a big proponent of universal healthcare, whether it be through a public option plus private market versus just public option, whichever it is. Okay. I'm in favor of universal healthcare. And, Donald Trump's record on healthcare is just not good. He's the only president ever to oversee an increase in the uninsured rate. And he tried to explicitly destroy the Affordable Care Act, which would have gotten rid of coverage for pre-existing conditions and rolled back Medicaid expansions across the country, losing tens of millions of people off their health care. And JD Vance, memory holes that, and he just kind of pretends that doesn't happen. And he said that, no, Donald Trump, when he was in office, he ran Obamacare. He ran it great. And it's like, I'm sorry, do you not think that we have memories? If it wasn't for John McCain, there would be no Affordable Care Act anymore. And I don't. One of the reasons I think Vance did so well is because he was able to skirt past those mistruths,
Yes.
and just ride that wave.
Yes. Well, it's almost like when the New York Times does its fact checking, it'll say this is false for some things. It'll say this is misleading for other things. And Vance just misled his way through this debate
Every
like
time.
no other. And it was brilliant of him. Like I think he did a fantastic job because that's a great answer to a question about healthcare and a question about the Affordable Care Act. If your running mate does have a record of trying to kill it when it's so politically popular.
Right. If the Republican Party has been running to kill Obamacare since 2010, not a single Republican ever voted for Obamacare, and now you're going to try to be the party that runs Obamacare better. I mean, that's just. But listen, it's a good strategy.
Exactly.
And that's why I give him credit on that for doing well in the debate because he was able to make that argument.
Yes.
Another area was when we were talking about homes, right? The housing crisis. And it's no secret in America that we have a housing crisis. Housing is too expensive. We need to build more of it. And Vance really just takes the position that the biggest problem is that there are too many illegal immigrants buying up homes.
Yeah, it's so funny because he starts his answer with, I don't want to blame the immigrants for the housing prices to being so high, and goes directly into blaming the immigrants.
He's like, I don't want to blame immigrants for causing housing prices to go so high, but I blame Kamala for inviting them in.
Yes.
And it's like, bro, what are you talking about? It's like, it reminds me, okay, this is how I think about it, all right? You have a birthday party and you invite 10 kids, but there's only 7 chairs. Do you kill 3 kids or do you just buy more chairs? And that's how I feel with this debate because it's just like, what are we even doing right now? We just kick them out and say, all right, go back to your parents. You were invited, but we don't. You know what I mean? That's how I feel with the whole topic. But he references a Federal Reserve study. And he's like, I'm going to publish this Federal Reserve study after the debate. He publishes not a Federal Reserve study because there is not one. He publishes an opinion that was 4 sentences long by one of the Federal Reserve governors, where the Federal Reserve governor says explicitly that it's his intuition and does not cite a study in that opinion that he gave. So it's like he tries
if that isn't emblematic,
yes,
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that was the whole debate.
Yeah.
Right? That was the whole debate. Also, Vance makes weird, I don't want to say weird comments, but he says that he supports paid family leave. Republicans have been voting against paid family leave forever.
Yes, this is where I think Waltz was so strong because he was like, again, that's where he's like, we agree. Apparently, we agree. I want paid family leave. I'm pro-family. made it happen
Yes.
in Minnesota.
Minnesota
right?
literally passed paid family leave. Ohio has not.
Yes, Minnesota passed it under Tim Walz as governor, and he is like, so. But here's the thing: but you haven't done it. You keep voting against it, whereas we have it in our plan.
Yeah. Or child tax credit expansion. The Republicans in the Senate just killed an expanded child tax credit that would have increased it from like 2,600 to like 28 or something like that. They just killed it. And now Democrats are running on putting it to 3,600 throughout a child's life, and then 6,000 for the first year. And then J.D. Vance says, no, I'm in favor of a $5,000 child tax credit. And then it's like, wait, you just voted not to raise it.
Yeah.
So it's a very, I do not envy Tim Walz's position of having to debate a guy like that, because when they just lie that blatantly, it's very, very difficult.
The one other thing I want to say though is that I think Walz actually handled the lies pretty well.
Okay.
Because, and I was thinking about this morning. A lot of the time, he would just quickly at the beginning of his response, he'd be like, "Well, that's not true," and then get into kind of more of a positive view of but here's what I think about the issue, and this is what I think we should do. Like, what is it? What is it? Clinton at the DNC had the quote, "Don't count the lies, count the eyes."
Yes,
for
yeah,
Trump.
that was good.
It's not necessarily like super attributable to Vance, because Vance wasn't really boasting about himself, but the whole like trying to get Trump or Vance for lying, we're past that now.
Yeah.
Right? They're bulletproof to that. We
And to be
can't
honest,
get them with that.
I have a list of like 20 of them, and I'm not going to go through them all.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
No.
It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant.
No.
But do you think that this debate was relevant?
Maybe a hair.
Right.
Maybe a hair. We are so close to the election that like it could stay in people's minds, but we're also maybe far enough away from the election that it couldn't.
Well, what's interesting was the viewership rate was still like 60 million people.
Really?
Which is like close to what it was for the presidential.
Wow.
So the viewership was pretty good.
Okay.
And I do think that this debate says a lot about 2028, if not 2024. I don't think Tim Walz will ever run for president, but Vance most certainly will.
Okay.
And I think that this is going to be pretty interesting to see like him carving out his path.
Okay.
In the Republican Party.
Okay, but you don't think it's necessarily relevant for this year?
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of people have made up their minds pretty solidly. I don't think many people are going to get swayed, as we see by the polls here, right? It's a kind of a wash. Some independents lean Walz. Whether or not that makes them more likely to support, I don't know. But we'll see.